Resuming debate, the honourable member for Kootenay-Columbia.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleague from Courtenay, Alberni, for his great speech and his passion on this subject. I'm proud to rise today to speak to a motion that not only works to protect Canada's environment, but that calls on the government to invest in green energy and green jobs. I've heard from many constituents in my riding of Kootenay-Columbia on this issue. I will tell you up front that some of these constituents would like to see the pipeline built. I hope to see some jobs come out of this project, but before we celebrate that, in my opinion, that isn't as much an indication of support for the pipeline as it is desperation to find good jobs in the construction sector. And it's actually a condemnation of the lack of good jobs created by the federal government, but that's a debate for another day. The Kinder Morgan pipeline, or pipe dream as some are calling it, will not create the jobs they are hoping for. In fact, it's estimated that fewer than between 2,500 and 3,000 jobs will be created in the short-term construction phase. And maintaining the pipeline will employ even fewer than 100 workers. That's not enough to make this project valuable to British Columbia workers compared to the potential job loss from even one coastal oil spill. And there are better ways to create jobs. Last summer, my BC colleagues and I hired an economist to study the green energy economy in our province. We haven't released the full report yet, but I'd like to read you some sections of it. And I quote, "In developing an energy strategy, the first strategic focus should be on efficient buildings via green building codes and retrofit strategies. Efficient building is a low-cost option with high employment potential." Next, the focus should be on increasing the portion of renewable resources in electricity, heat, and transportation. There are feasible energy technologies across BC. Solar in the Kootenays, and we have two examples already operating in the Kootenays. One is the 1.05 megawatt Kimberley solar mine, and the other is Nelson Solar Garden. And in that situation, it's a great story actually. The power company, Nelson Power Company, sold the opportunity to residents to buy their own solar panel, and after purchasing the panel, they get to reduce their electricity bills over time by the amount of their investment. So it's a great story for everyone in the end. There's also lots of opportunity for run-of-river hydropower across the province, geothermal in the lower mainland and the interior, biomass energy production in the Caribou and Thompson Okanagan, and wind on Vancouver Island and the North Coast. An energy strategy should include provisions for multiple sources of energy tailored to the geography and strengths of each region. So imagine, if we could for a minute, instead of throwing $4.5 billion at a leaky 65-year-old pipeline to support the carbon industry, and $7 to $12 billion more in potentially building a new pipeline, we invested that money in renewable technologies for the future. Canada could be a world leader in the green economy rather than another follower of the time-tenured fossil fuel industry. This is an important part of the motion we are debating today. Part B of the motion says, putting workers and skills training at the heart of the transition to a clean energy economy so they don't have to choose between a good job and a healthy environment for themselves and their families. And also with local energy production, you don't have to leave home in order to make a living. We call it a just transition, Mr. Speaker. It would provide a fair plan for workers in the traditional energy sector to adapt to a new economy. And there are many transferable skills between oil and gas and renewable energy occupations, as well as higher job creation potential in renewable energy streams. It is important, actually, no, it's essential that Canada make the transition to a green economy as quickly as possible. Besides the fact that we are woefully behind in our international obligations to do our part to combat climate change, the environmental risks of completing this pipeline are tremendous. My colleagues who represent the coastal areas of BC have spoken very eloquently about the risks to our fragile marine environments on many occasions. We hear less about the problems the pipeline could present for BC's interior. The route of this Kinder Morgan pipeline passes through a national park and a BC provincial park. A bitumen leak in either of those places could be devastating for local wildlife, for the lakes and rivers, and for the people who enjoy those places that we have committed to protecting. But we don't even need a leak to see harm to these natural areas. When construction equipment and crews move from one site to another, they commonly carry with them seeds and spores from previous sites. They can also carry harmful insects that are stowed away in heavy earth movers or other equipment. This cross-contamination from one site to another creates a very real opportunity to introduce invasive species into our parks. And I am not aware of any program or system the government and its contractors plan to implement to prevent the transfer of invasive species from one place to another. But let's return to the issue of bitumen leaks for a minute. The government and the corporations repeat the same refrain. These pipelines are built to accepted standards. Leaks can't possibly happen. And that's nonsense, Mr. Speaker. Pipeline leaks can and do happen, and it's guaranteed that they will happen again. Let's look at Kinder Morgan's record, for example. According to the website The Sacred Trust, since the 1960s, the longest period of time the Trans Mountain Pipeline has gone without a spill is approximately 4 years. July 15, 2005, 2,010 liters of crude oil leaked. June 4, 2007, 69,500 liters leaked. July 24, 2007, 250,000 liters of crude oil leaked, contaminating a large portion of Burrard Inlet. May 6, 2009, 200,000 liters leaked from Kinder Morgan's storage facility in Burnaby, BC. January 4, 2012, 110,000 liters of crude oil leaked in Abbotsford. And May 27, 2018, a mere 2 days before the government announced its poorly thought-out decision to buy this pipeline, a pumping station north of Kamloops leaked an estimated 4,800 liters of medium crude oil. This pipeline is about as leak-proof as the Titanic was unsinkable. If the government and the company wanted to convince Canadians that these pipelines are safe, they should begin by improving the standards to which they are built. There should be an obligation on pipeline companies to fully pay for the cleanup of any spills, and any pipeline company CEOs should face criminal charges should leaks occur. Do that, and we will see one of two things happen. Either pipelines that don't leak will actually be built, or companies will decide that maybe the risk is greater than the reward and basically would stop doing what they're doing, including governments. While the idea of corporate criminal liability may be new here, it has been the case in Europe for decades. Belgium, Czech Republic, France, Italy, and many others hold corporations as legal entities that may be criminally charged. And in many jurisdictions, the corporate officers may be held liable. Let me finish, Mr. Speaker, by quoting correspondence from my constituents in Kootenay-Columbia about the pipeline project. Vicky in Revelstoke wrote, "Your government says this Texas oil company's pipeline is in the national interest. We believe that having a safe climate is in our national interest, and the two are not compatible. Do not throw our precious public money into the coffers of an oil giant subsidizing the profits of a 19th century industry. Instead, act in the true national interest and invest in the future, a 21st century energy system, public services, and clean infrastructure for all." Stewart and Nelson wrote, "The reluctance of private enterprise to invest in this project is a clear signal that conditions have changed to make it an unwise investment. Yet you and your government continue to prop up the dying fossil fuel industry, this time with Canadian taxpayers taking the risk. This is completely unacceptable." And Lorna from Caslow wrote, "Canada has unmet climate commitments. The fossil fuel industry is clearly changing our global climate. My hope is that Canada will join with other visionary countries by redirecting our investments towards renewable energy and toward reducing our energy consumption." I agree with Vicky, Stewart and Lorna and the many others from my riding of Kootenay-Columbia who have written to oppose the government's purchase of this pipeline that Kinder Morgan was happy to get rid of. Canadians want jobs, but they want green jobs, and they don't want to see their money wasted on another government buyout. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and